Did you know that a single tiny copper coin could change someone's life forever and turn an everyday pocket find into the ultimate treasure hunt jackpot? Because the 1953 USA wheat penny, a humble-looking coin that most people would overlook without a second thought, has a story so wild, so packed with twists of history, minting quirks, collector obsession, and mind-blowing rarity that it's earned a face value in collectors' circles so astonishing it can climb as high as $5 million. And it all starts in the post-war United States when coin production was still recovering from wartime shortages. Copper was in high demand for industrial and military uses, and the Denver Mint was tasked with producing millions of pennies to meet circulation needs. But here's the twist. Most 1953 wheat pennies were struck without issue, the kind you could still find rolling out of a coin jar in Grandma's kitchen. Except for a microscopic number of them that came out with unusual features. Doubled dies, off-center strikes, repunched mint marks, or in some cases struck on the wrong planchet entirely, making them unicorns in the numismatic world. And when you combine that with pristine, uncirculated condition, a perfect red luster that makes it look like it was struck yesterday, and a high grade from a trusted grading service like PCGS or NGC, you've got a coin so desirable that wealthy collectors will enter bidding wars to outspend one another in auctions, driving the price into the stratosphere. And this is where the $5 million figure comes in. Because while the average 1953 penny in circulated condition might fetch only a few cents, and a slightly better one might go for a few dollars, there are documented instances where rare variants have sold for astronomical amounts due to a perfect storm of rarity, demand, condition, and collector rivalry. And that's what makes this story fascinating. How can two coins with the same year and mint mark be worth such wildly different amounts? The answer lies in the art and science of coin grading, the psychology of scarcity, and the relentless hunt by numismatists who scour estate sales, flea markets, and even old rolls from banks hoping to find the one. And imagine the rush of opening an old paper roll of pennies from the 1950s, smelling the faint metallic tang, and spotting a wheat reverse with sharp detail, flipping it over and realizing it's a Denver Mint with flawless strike, maybe even a known error. Variety, your hands shaking because you know that you've just pulled a life-changing artifact from a handful of copper, the kind of find that turns everyday people into millionaires overnight. And of course the story of the wheat penny itself is steeped in American history, first minted in 1909 to commemorate the centennial of Abraham Lincoln's birth. Designed by Victor David Brenner with the famous profile of Lincoln on the obverse, and two stalks of wheat framing the denomination on the reverse, a design that would remain iconic until it was replaced by the Lincoln Memorial reverse in 1959, and for collectors, each year, mint and variety tells a different story. But the 1953 has this special mystique because it's right in that sweet spot of mid-century minting where quality control was good enough to make well-struck coins but the occasional mistake still slipped through. And the Denver Mint's output in that year had its quirks that are now immortalized in high-value specimens. And if you think all this is just hype, consider the auction houses like Heritage Auctions or Stack's Bowers, where serious bidders throw down 6 and 7 figures without hesitation when a top-graded or error coin comes up, because in their eyes they're not just buying metal, they're buying history, a piece of Americana, and the bragging rights of owning something vanishingly rare. And the psychology here is fascinating too because scarcity drives desire, desire drives competition, and competition drives price, creating a feedback loop that can turn a penny into a fortune. And stories of lucky finds fuel the fire, like the man who found a high-grade wheat penny in change from a vending machine or the teenager who discovered one in a coin jar while saving for a bike, only to have it appraised and learn it was worth enough to buy a house. And every time stories like that circulate online, they inspire thousands more people to start checking their coins, driving up awareness and feeding the hunt. And the market for rare coins is global now thanks to online marketplaces, meaning that a 1953 wheat penny in mint state could sell to a collector halfway around the world without ever leaving the protective slab it was graded in. And this globalization of the hobby has only made the top-tier coins more valuable. And what's wild is that pennies, especially wheat pennies, are one of the most accessible collectibles. Anyone can start looking for them without a big investment. which means the next millionaire-making find could literally be sitting in your couch cushions right now, and yet the odds are slim. Which is why when a high-grade or era 1953D shows up, it becomes headline news in numismatic circles, and people marvel at how a coin that once bought a gumball could now buy a mansion. And this contrast between humble origins and sky-high value is part of what makes these stories so compelling. It's like a modern treasure hunt wrapped in history. And every collector knows that feeling of turning a coin over in their fingers, letting the light catch the luster, and wondering if they might be holding the next big find. And for the 1953 Dewey penny, the legend just keeps growing as prices climb and stories spread. And the bottom line is this: check your change, search your jars, and don't dismiss that old copper because it could be the rare variety, the perfect grade, the once-in-a-lifetime coin that changes everything. And if you enjoy diving into the thrilling journey of how a simple penny can hold such unimaginable value, make sure to like this, share it with your friends who might have hidden treasures of their own, and subscribe so you never miss the next incredible story of coins that made history and the collectors who chased them. And if you thought the 1953 Dewey penny story was unbelievable, wait until you hear about the 1955 1-cent wheat penny, a coin so famous among collectors that even people outside the numismatic community have heard whispers of it, because its most legendary form, the 1955 double-die obverse, is not just a minting error, it's one of the most dramatic, eye-catching mistakes ever to leave a U.S. mint, and in pristine condition it can command up to $3 million or more, turning an otherwise ordinary copper cent into a prize so valuable that it has inspired decades of coin roll hunting, endless debates about authenticity, and even forgeries. And the origin of this marvel lies in the way dies are created at the mint, because in 1955 at the Philadelphia Mint, during the die-making process, one working die received a misaligned second impression of the design, meaning the date and inscriptions on the obverse, including Liberty and In God We Trust, appear strongly doubled. To the naked eye, not the subtle doubling that requires magnification but bold, unmistakable doubling that jumps out instantly. And when coins were struck from this faulty die, they went unnoticed at first and entered circulation, mostly in the northeastern United States, often found mixed in rolls distributed by cigarette vending machines, and this quirk of fate meant ordinary people, factory workers, schoolchildren, shop owners, were suddenly finding pennies in their change that looked strange, and before long the numismatic press caught wind, sparking a nationwide hunt for the doubled die, and by the time the mint realized what had happened, the coins were out in the wild and could never be recalled, cementing their place in history. And while many examples exist in circulated condition worth hundreds or thousands, the real jaw-droppers are the uncirculated, brilliant red specimens graded MS-65 or higher by top grading services, because these are the ones that can hit multi-million-dollar price tags at major auctions, fueled by the perfect storm of rarity, visual appeal, historical significance, and sheer collector mania. And unlike some rarities that require a microscope to verify, the 1955 double die is an instant conversation piece because the doubling is so prominent that even a casual observer can see it, making it a gateway coin that has drawn countless new collectors into the hobby. And part of the charm is that it's in every man's rarity. It wasn't struck as a special edition, wasn't hoarded by insiders, it just slipped into everyday pockets and purses in 1955, giving ordinary Americans a chance to stumble upon a fortune in their change, and stories abound of people finding one decades later in a jar of pennies or in an old cash register drawer, the copper still gleaming beneath a thin film of history. And when you hold one of these coins, you're not just holding metal, you're holding a tangible mistake that somehow became a masterpiece. And auction houses love them because they attract both seasoned collectors and wealthy investors who see them as both a hobby prize and a hedge against inflation. And the market for these coins has only grown as awareness spreads online, with coin hunting videos, collector blogs, and social media posts stoking the fire, leading more people to check their pocket change for that telltale doubling. And the result is a self-perpetuating legend. The more people talk about it, the more famous it becomes. And the more famous it becomes, the higher the top-end prices go when one of the finest examples hits the auction block, sometimes fetching sums in the millions for that perfect combination of luster, strike, and eye appeal. And to think it all started with one die operator's slip during a routine part of the minting process, a reminder that sometimes imperfection creates the most lasting beauty. So if the 1953 D story got you digging through your old coin rolls, the 1955 double die should have you checking every single wheat penny you find with extra care, because that next coin you spot in your palm could be worth not just hundreds or thousands but potentially $3 million or more. And if this mind-blowing history of the 1955 1-cent wheat penny fired up your treasure hunting instincts. And the thing about the 1955 1-cent wheat penny that keeps its legend alive isn't just the staggering price tag or the dramatic doubling you can see without even squinting. It's the way this coin embodies the thrill of the hunt, because unlike ultra-rare commemoratives or low-mintage gold coins that were never intended for circulation, this penny lived a working-class life, rattling around in lunchboxes, riding along in denim pockets, and jingling in change drawers, and yet some managed to survive the decades in pristine, untouched condition, tucked away in bank rolls or forgotten in jars by people who didn't realize what they had, and now those survivors are the holy grail for collectors, commanding not just money but respect in the numismatic community, because owning a 1955 double die is like holding a piece of minting folklore in your hands, a coin whose story has been told and retold at coin shows, in collector clubs, and now across the internet, where images of its bold double date and inscription spark instant recognition. And what's fascinating is that this coin's fame has given rise to a whole ecosystem of authentication services, educational guides, and even counterfeit detection seminars, because where there's money and rarity, there will always be fakes, with some forgers crudely altering dates or using digital methods to replicate the look of doubling. But seasoned experts know that true double die coins have specific markers: the spread on the date, the thickness of the letters in Liberty, and the precise nature of the doubling, that are nearly impossible to duplicate perfectly, and spotting those details is part science, part art, and entirely satisfying when you get it right. And this demand for certainty has made grading services like PCGS and NGC indispensable, because a certified, slab example of a 1955 double die isn't just a coin, it's a documented piece of history with a guarantee that reassures buyers, and once in that slab, its fate is sealed as a high-end collectible that can pass from one passionate owner to another, sometimes staying in private collections for decades before re-emerging to fanfare at a major auction. And every time one of these beauties crosses the block and smashes a price record, it sends a ripple of excitement through the hobby, inspiring new hunters and reigniting old passions. And that's the magic of coins like this. They connect generations, spark conversations, and make you realize that history can be held between your fingers. And when you think about it, the 1955 double die is a perfect example of how small accidents can lead to monumental legacies. Because if that die had been aligned correctly, if quality control had caught the error before the coins were released, there would be no story, no legend, no million-dollar hunts. And yet here we are, decades later, still talking about it, still chasing it, still dreaming of that moment when you dump out a handful of pennies and see those doubled numbers staring back at you. Your heart racing at the thought that you might just be holding a piece worth more than most people's cars. And this is why coin collecting remains such a powerful, addictive hobby, because even in an age of digital payments and cashless transactions, the lure of finding a rare treasure in everyday change is as strong as ever. And with the 1955 1-cent wheat penny, that dream is backed by a market that has proven time and again it will reward rarity, beauty, and history with life-changing sums. So keep your eyes sharp, your magnifying glass handy, and your curiosity alive, because treasures like this aren't gone, they're just waiting for the right person to find them. And if you're enjoying this journey into the hidden fortunes hiding in plain sight, like this, share it with fellow seekers, and subscribe so you never miss the next story that could lead you straight to your own jackpot in small change. And now we come to another incredible chapter in the saga of life-changing pennies, the 1946 1-cent wheat penny, a coin whose top-tier rarest variety has stunned the numismatic world by commanding prices as high as $6 million for the finest, most unusual specimens, and the key to understanding how a simple post-war Lincoln wheat cent could reach such dizzying values lies in the historical context. Minting quirks, and a very specific kind of rarity that makes collectors' hearts skip a beat, because 1946 was the year the United States Mint transitioned fully back to using copper planchets after the wartime steel cents of 1943 and the partial brass alloys of 1944 and 1945, when shell casings from spent ammunition were recycled into coin metal. And while most 1946 pennies were ordinary copper coins struck in huge quantities, there exists a tiny, almost mythical subset of 1946 cents that were struck on leftover experimental or transitional planchets, or exhibit rare doubled dies, off-metal strikes, or extraordinary proof-like surfaces never meant for general circulation, and the existence of these coins is tied to the chaotic post-war period in the mint's operations, when leftover materials and dies were sometimes used unexpectedly, resulting in accidental rarities that today fetch unimaginable sums. And to make matters more tantalizing, some 1946 wheat pennies are so pristine, with blazing red luster and virtually perfect strikes, that they represent the very peak of what a mid-century U.S. cent could look like. And when such condition is combined with a unique error or transitional composition, the result is a one-of-a-kind coin that can ignite frenzied bidding among deep-pocketed collectors, pushing prices into the multi-million-dollar range. And what sets the $6 million figure apart is that it's not just about rarity but also about narrative. Because in the world of high-end collectibles, a great story magnifies value, and the story here is that some of these 1946 cents, possibly struck on leftover 1943 steel or 1944 brass shellcase planchets, slipped into circulation unnoticed, only to be discovered decades later by sharp-eyed collectors or passed down quietly in family coin jars until someone recognized their true nature. And imagine the shock of taking what you thought was a common wheat penny to a reputable dealer, only to have them gasp, pull out specialized scales and magnets, and confirm that you are holding one of the most valuable cents ever produced, a piece of minting history that survived purely by accident. And these coins, when authenticated and graded by PCGS or NGC at the highest levels, become the crown jewels of any collection, often sold privately to elite numismatists who treat them like fine art, insuring them for millions and showing them only at prestigious coin expos under tight security. And the demand for these ultra-rare 1946 cents is global, with wealthy collectors in the United States, Europe, and Asia willing to pay staggering amounts to own what might be the single finest known example of its type. And while the average 1946 penny in your change might only be worth a few cents, the very idea that one could be worth 6 million fuels the imagination and drives the relentless search, because the beauty of coin collecting is that treasures like this don't have to be locked away in museums. They could still be hiding in old rolls, tucked in forgotten cigar boxes, or resting at the bottom of a desk drawer, waiting for someone curious enough to look closely, weigh them, examine the edges, and spot the telltale signs of an extraordinary piece. And this possibility is what keeps the hobby alive across generations, uniting seasoned experts with beginners who are just learning to tell the difference between common and rare. And in the case of the 1946 1-cent wheat penny, the potential payoff for that knowledge is staggering, a reward not just in money but in the thrill of discovery, the connection to history, and the pride of knowing you found something that almost no one else on earth possesses. So the next time you come across a 1946 wheat penny, don't dismiss it, inspect it, research it, and who knows, you might be holding a $6 million slice of American history, because the deeper you dive into the mystery of the 1946 1-cent wheat penny, the more you realize that its $6 million mystique isn't a simple case of old coin equals big money. It's a perfect storm of timing, metallurgy, minting quirks, and collector psychology. And one of the most compelling parts of its story is how it straddles two very different eras of U.S. coinage, standing as the first truly peacetime penny after the intense years of World War II production, when every ounce of copper and brass was accounted for, and yet still carrying within its ranks remnants of wartime experiments, like the leftover steel planchets from 1943 or the brass shellcase alloys of 1944 and 1945, which, due to the mint's habit of never wasting usable metal, occasionally found their way into presses long after their official year of use had ended, and that's why some 1946 wheat pennies, when tested, turn out to have unusual compositions, whether they're magnetic from steel content or slightly off in weight from non-standard alloys, making them stand out to experienced numismatists as possible transitional strikes. And these are the coins that make hearts race. Because they're not just rare, they're tangible evidence of the mint's internal processes, of human decisions made on the fly, of the imperfections and improvisations that history tends to gloss over. And holding one is like holding a frozen moment from 1946, when the United States was flush with post-war optimism, industries were shifting back to consumer goods, and everyday Americans were adjusting to peacetime life, jingling these very coins in their pockets as they bought candy for their kids or paid for newspapers, completely unaware that a few of those pennies were destined to become treasures worth millions. And when one of these ultra-rare variants shows up at auction, the excitement in the room is palpable, the bidding often starting at sums that could buy a car and climbing rapidly into the realm of luxury homes, with serious collectors refusing to back down because they know such coins might not appear on the open market again for decades. And this scarcity is compounded by the fact that many of the rarest examples have vanished into private vaults, passed down in estates or traded quietly between elite dealers, never photographed or publicly displayed, which only fuels speculation and myth about how many survive, if any, in perfect mint state condition, and in a hobby where provenance, the history of a coin's ownership, can be as important as the coin itself. The 1946 rarities often come with fascinating paper trails, sometimes traced back to the very bank rolls they were discovered in, or to coin clubs where they were shown off long before their astronomical values were realized. And these stories add another layer of value, because high-end collectors aren't just buying metal, they're buying a piece of a story they can tell and retell. And perhaps the most intriguing thing is that despite all the modern technology and expert grading available today, the hunt for the ultimate 1946 penny remains as old-fashioned as it's ever been. You still have to look closely, weigh carefully, and understand what you're looking at, because even now, in an age where most transactions are digital, people are still discovering treasures in the most ordinary places, like change jars, desk drawers, or family heirloom boxes, and every new discovery sends a ripple through the numismatic community, reminding everyone that the next life-changing find could be just one coin away. So if the story of the 1946 wheat penny has taught us anything, it's that history hides in plain sight, wrapped in copper, worn by decades, and waiting for the right hands to uncover it. And if that prospect excites you, like this, share it with every treasure hunter you know, and subscribe so you never miss another unbelievable tale of how a humble penny can turn into a fortune that changes someone's life forever.